Hello everybody, it's Ellie Diecast. A little bit different view today. Welcome to the workshop. I've been getting some messages of folks that wanted me to do a little bit more with the customs and the dioramas that I've been working on, and I had a bunch of questions. I was going to answer them in the regular format, and then I just decided it would probably be easier just to show you how I do some things. So I'm going to start with the dioramas, and this will probably be a multi-part video, mainly because I think with all the editing and all, I'll probably go one or two parts for this. But we'll get started. So as you know, and hopefully I'll be able to show a picture right here, I also do dioramas. I make a lot of friends with the customs, but the dioramas I also do. I split my time about 50-50, and mainly the dioramas are to display the customs. I've just always been fascinated by little environments, and as most of you, at least that watch the channel quite a bit, know, my real day job is a digital artist, all on the computer, but I do a lot with textures and environments, and especially for video games, that kind of stuff. So rocks and dirt and desert environments and apocalyptic environments, forests, all that really interests me, and dioramas allow me to work with my hands and actually make something in real life that kind of fills a void that I don't get by making it in digitally. So for my dioramas, I always start with a base. Now you can look this up on YouTube. There's plenty of ways to start with a base, lots of different materials that you can use. The base is going to be completely covered anyway, so it's really not that important. I use this cheap board, and I've forgotten the name of this type of board. It's about the cheapest board that they sell at Home Depot. That's thick enough. I'll show you, it's pretty thick. It's probably about, what, a ½ inch thick. And the only thing you want to make sure of with your base is that it's not overly absorbent, so that it doesn't absorb all of the water that's going to be on top of this with the plaster or the hydrocal. But you also want to make sure it's not going to warp. And this board does a real good job of that. I cut the board down. I usually make most of my dioramas shorter than 2 feet. They're usually about 22 inches by about 10 inches to 20 inches deep. My needs are so that I can film them, and the base or the table that I use for my green screen and the filming is only so big, so I'm kind of limited. Plus the shelf space that I store these on is only so big. So that's why I use those dimensions. One thing to take into consideration when you do make these is if you're going to store them somewhere, make sure that they fit, because they're very delicate when they're done, and you don't want to put all that work into something that's just going to get torn up, you know, because you can't move it. Next, I use this foam. Car going by in the background. I use this foam. Now this goes under a lot of different names, and that's the name of what it goes by at my Home Depot, Formular. And this is an acoustic foam. It's also used for waterproofing. It's kind of an all-purpose house foam. And I use that to build up the base. And so, oops, they're very durable once they get going. So this looks horrible. It's going to look much better. But this is what I do with the foam. And I just build it up. I don't put my dioramas directly on the base, because I have no way of going down into the base or carving up if I just use that wood. So I glue sections on top, and then I just glue on sections, and these are going to end up being the hills. And right now it's a little wet. You'll see some wet glue on there. Everything's in place, but it looks ugly. You're never going to see any of this, so it doesn't matter. But what we're going to end up doing, if I can get this in here, is I'm going to shear off a lot of this. And so I'm going to end up with kind of some rolling hills back here, and then my road is going to be down here below. And there's going to be, or at least the plan is, there's going to be a little road that kind of comes up through here. But all of that has to be carved into this foam. and then it's going to get covered with plaster or hydrocal, but we'll deal with that when we get there. Lastly, I do glue this on, and I use Gorilla Glue to glue this on. You can also see I've used some craft glue for these top pieces. The two glues that I usually use are Gorilla Glue, especially to glue this to the base. And then I use, I'm looking at it up here, it's tacky glue. It's just the cheap tacky glue that you can get at Walmart for the smaller sections. And again, a lot of this is just going to be sheared and sanded down. So I only need it to just hold it in place. Also, if you have any little gaps like this, don't worry. It's just going to get filled in with plaster anyways. I've stuffed paper into these, tape. You can use all sorts of things to kind of hold it up. I would use some sort of support that's really light, whether that's paper covered with tape. Some people like to do that, or the foam. This is really light. I know it looks kind of heavy on the video, but we're probably talking maybe a pound for the whole thing right here. You want to make sure it's light because you don't want to go to all this effort and then have something that weighs a ton, and that's no fun. You're going to be piling a lot of plaster or hydrocal on this, and that can get heavy. Plaster's really heavy, hydrocal not so much, but the hydrocal's more expensive. You'll see what I use, and it's mostly plaster. So I'm going to go ahead and shear this down, and I'll try to film it while I do that, and you can kind of get an idea how that works. So I use this. So this stuff's all staticky, so it's going to stick, but it's still really pretty ugly. You can see road's going to be here, and this is going to be a little access road. The idea is this is going to be kind of a cemetery back here in the background for Halloween, like a I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but there'll be kind of a cemetery gate back here, spooky road here, lots of spooky trees and stuff over in here. So next what we're going to do is kind of form this a little bit better using some sandpaper. Get this stuff off of it. Like I said, it's really staticky. So we'll get that stuff off of it. I'm also going to clean this up. We'll be right back. Alright, next we're just going to form this a little bit more and really just clean it up. All these little parts that are kind of sticking up, little holes and stuff, they all have to be sanded down. Otherwise they'll stick up through the plaster, and then when you sand the plaster, you'll get these weird little pink spots. So I just use 150 sandpaper. One thing to be aware of, for some reason when this stuff sands, it gets really hot. So don't burn your thumb. Believe it or not, I guess it's just really dense, so there's a lot of friction. Okay, so now that's sanded. You can see it's a lot smoother. Well, maybe you can see. Here you go. You can see it's a lot smoother. Now, the smoothness is really going to go away when we add the... got some glue there. When we add the plaster on top of it. And little areas like this that are kind of loose, it doesn't matter. Plaster is just going to put those It's going to hold that in place. You also saw me probably roughing up the flat areas. This foam has like a plastic cover that sands off really easy, and that'll just give everything that I put on top of this a better grip. So next, we're going to go in here with the Dremel, and we're going to carve in some details that I want to preserve when we put the plaster on. So next I'm going to go in here and put in some erosion marks and just some kind of big details. Again, the small details we'll get with the plaster. And to kind of give you the idea of what's going to happen, over here the idea is there's going to be a wall, kind of in this area here, an old broken down wall. Trees up on these plateaus so that I can get some cool silhouettes in the videos on top of these mountains. And then this is going to end up being a road. I need to smooth out this road a little bit more so it's not such a harsh transformation, and I need to do some work over here with the wall. I'm using a big, I think these are 60 grit sand drums. They're just the generic ones. I use an old one. I don't even use a new one. You can see this one's kind of torn up. That way I don't waste them. This stuff can melt on it. That's what you're seeing on here, but I just keep using the same drum. Okay, you probably saw the Dremel hopping around, and that makes for these details. These details over here, there we go, that are going to be rock formations, and I wanted this to be a little bit more jagged rock than the smooth rock. That's why I dug all this out. Now, eventually I'm going to be putting plaster casts of rocks in here. So it's not going to look exactly like this, but you can think of those as little shelves that I'm going to put the rock in. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. All right. Also, do be careful. This stuff heats up, and sometimes it can spit off of your Dremel. Doesn't burn, but it's not comfortable. So now I have these kind of little shelves, and what I'm going to be doing is putting rocks in these to make that look more like a rock face. At this point, I usually go in and give it a quick sand just to get rid of some of the little beads that are in there, but not to try and smooth it out. It's just those little beads keep things from adhering well. And at this point, the next thing that we would do is go ahead and start prepping it for the plaster. Okay, we got this mostly ready. At this point, make sure you've sanded down any flat surfaces that's got this kind of, you can kind of see it there, this plasticky stuff on it. And sand those down quite that much, and give it a quick brush. We want everything to stick to it. Nothing's more frustrating than getting it all looking nice and then having it pop up off the surface. So I'm picking off a few of these little plastic pieces here. Looks pretty good. Okay, I'll be back in a second, and we're going to get the plaster ready. Okay, so you've got some choices when you put your plaster on. I use dental plaster, and not that it looks a whole lot different than anything else, but dental plaster is the heaviest of the choices. It's also, I think, the cheapest, at least for what I do. So I like to use it as kind of the main base, and then I'll go back over and use lighter materials for, say, the rocks or the details. Everybody does this different. Now you can also use a product called hydrocal, which I have, and we will probably see here down the road. I just don't have it out right now. And hydrocal you could think of as a very lightweight plaster. I think it's actually a paper product, not plaster, but it basically works the same, and it's very lightweight. The thing I don't like about hydrocal is it tends not to stick great to this type of material. It kind of beads up on it, where the plaster won't. Mixing the plaster is as easy as just getting a cup. Basically just pour the plaster in. I mix up small batches. This is very fast drying plaster that I have. You don't have to get the fast drying type. But then we're going to mix water into that. And I just use a little stick, 99-cent store stick. So what we're going to do is mix some water in here. Getting the consistency exactly right isn't a big deal with plaster. It's pretty forgiving. You want to use a material or a container with a flat bottom. And you can see that that's kind of chunky. You want it, if nothing else, so that it holds its form, so that you can stick it on the side of things. You don't want it overly runny. And you can always add more if you need to. Most of this is going to get mixed once I get it onto the surface. So there we go. And I just pour it on. And then I just use my hands to kind of mush it around. The first coat's going to be pretty thin, so you just want it to cover. And if you have any holes, just fill them up like that. This area down below that is the street or the road, doesn't really matter if that stays perfectly flat. This stuff sands really well. I'm trying not to fill in too much with too thick of plaster so that it keeps its form. And I just kind of scrub in a top layer so that the rest of the plaster has something to grip on. I always cover the sides too, but you don't have to. And I didn't put newspaper down first, but I have my table covered here. I just change the cloth every once in a while. It's not going to hurt it. The plaster will come right off. So you don't really need to try and get like rock formations at this point. You're just trying to cover the surface. And just keep any areas that you already molded from getting too much plaster in them. And I'm spending some time filling in the holes that were there. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's kind of like a first layer of icing on a cake. Okay, we'll let that dry for just a minute. I still need to touch up a little bit, but we'll get to that in the next round. Okay, and we're going to be doing the next layer on this, which is really just adding some thickness where I think I might want to carve down. This time this stuff's about the consistency of shaving cream. I'm just going to go ahead and start putting some of this down where I want some inconsistencies. I don't want all of this to be completely flat here. This will be the bank of the road on what'll be my camera side for my needs. And I usually put a very small bank, but just keep in mind we got to be able to see over it. As it gets thicker, you can kind of model in little ridges with it real easily. Okay, it looks like it still needs another layer here to cover the front and some of this in here. All right, we got one more go around. This is a little bit thinner because I'm going to use it to cover some of the road and smooth out some areas. So this will just fill in any low spots. I'm also going to cover up the front here. Okay, so as you can see, we've got kind of a flat surface here for a road. Now that's going to be really detailed out a lot more, but I don't want to build this up too high or my camera can't see over the top of it. For most of you, well, that's probably not an issue, but it's something I need to consider. Also, I've smoothed out this road quite a bit, and you might have seen me spending a lot of time here on the rock edges. I'm trying to dig out those gouges that I made, because again, I'm going to be sticking rocks into those areas, and so they look more like rock overhangs than rock steps. We'll see that in the next round. So this is going to dry. I'm actually going to go ahead and do the back, but that's not very exciting to do on video. And then I'm going to let it dry, and we'll be back for part 2. So as you can see, it's really pretty simple. I did most of this. Oh, I don't think this took any more than an hour to get to this point. Anybody could do that. And we'll get to the painting and the detailing here in part 2. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in part 2. Bye.